The drive to be competitive takes a massive amount of focus and dedication, but it's different to dabble in being competitive yet focusing massively on content versus focusing on competition yet kind of dabbling within content. It's very hard to do one versus the other because, well, you can it's very hard to barely be a competitor. Like there's almost no such thing unless you were just insanely naturally gifted at the game, and yet you do a massive amount of content. There's hardly anyone like that. And so it becomes this debacle of how much time should you spend on content versus practicing. Now, some players they need to focus 100% on practice, but because not everyone can multitask and worry about their brand, and worry about their image, and what kind of content that they're creating. And so there becomes this time to where maybe you might have to sacrifice your free time in order to do content. And this could be this draining thing, this draining hole to where now you aren't even enjoying doing content because it just feels like another job. But you also have to care about the career you have after you are a pro, because we all know that so far the track record is the pro career does not last very long. It lasts maybe 2 to 3 years and then you're done, unless you are a very, very exceptional player. And then you also have all these other players, especially those over in LCK or Korea, that are constantly practicing, constantly trying to get better. And so if you are an average player and you aren't putting in this 110% to get better, then you're never going to be able to catch up to other people. And so it's all about the efficiency of practice, but also the hours that you put into it as well too. And so if you're this average player and you're doing a ton of content and yet you're trying to stay competitive, you're probably going to fall behind. And so it's this crazy arms race of who can keep staying competitive and who has this competitive drive instead of focusing on content. And that becomes a problem. And there's a different conversation as to whether these pro players are practicing too much. I think that's a different side story, but there is the reality that you may fall behind. Now, there is one good thing with content creation, I think, which is the self-reflection aspect. Because in a lot of videos, say the TSM Legends or Team Liquid Rebirth, those shows, it allows the player to kind of self-reflect, to sit there, talk with the camera, and just let their feelings out about what they have about the team, what they have about their own problems, and things like that in general, whether that be about life or about their current situation or whatnot. So I think this is a very therapeutic process. And that also goes with interviews. Whenever I do interviews with a player, I feel as though I should ask them some questions to get some self-reflection, to kind of make them realize what they themselves think about whatever play that they did or their team surroundings or whatnot, because it can be very therapeutic and it can help them kind of better themselves. But also in Lei, it helps the fans get to know that player to a personal level instead. So I think it's good for both aspects. So that is probably the biggest positive when it comes to content creation, other than the fact of just enjoying it yourself. If you are one of those people that do just enjoy content creation and not look at it as it being a job, then yeah, more power to you, right? Now, there's one guy that stands out who is a kind of content creation king, at least back in his day too. Still quite relevant now. I'm a cutie pie, right? And it's known to say that his work ethic to grow his personal brand while competing took a ton out of him because he had to focus on that. After doing a whole bunch of scrim blocks, he would go and stream, and his girlfriend convinced him to keep streaming and keep building his own personal brand because she felt that was important, and so just kind of urged him to do this so that maybe he has a future outside of professional play. And it's one of the best decisions that he ever did, right? And but not everyone can do that though, right? It takes a long time for a streamer to play 100% on stream, and I feel like he is probably one of the few players that can actually play at 100% on stream. But even still, playing on stream doesn't give you the most optimal practice, right? I think everyone knows that. And maybe you don't have this personality, right, to deal with the pressure of a personal audience because it is vastly different from being on stage. On stage, it's separated between, 10 people. So not all of the audience is actually looking at you or looking at your plays. They're looking at 10 people. But on a stream, it's all about you. It's all about how much attention that you give to the fans or how you interact with the fans, because that's what they're there for. And so just like competition, it's hard to replicate how to create that home environment and how to do that on a stream or even in a video. It's very difficult to do as well. And then of course you have the interacting with chat and changing it up a bit because you don't want your stream to be monotonous, right? So you want to get different champions and different items and style of play, and that could be inconducive to regular competitive practice. Maybe you aren't practicing that champion that you should be practicing. Maybe you need to work on your Talia because it's super meta, and yet you want to entertain your fans, so you're playing, fucking Corky. So it becomes this decision of how far do you want to go into content creation and doing good content creation. And I'm not saying that they need to stop all content, but people need to take into account what type of person they are, how much that they can invest themselves in to do content, and either try and enjoy it or try and make a brand out of it so that they can continue their lives maybe outside of esports or in esports still, but just in a different department, not as a player, maybe as a coach or as an analyst or something. So while it's very important to do content creation, I do think that it affects a person's competitiveness because they are taking time out of their day, focusing away from the game or optimal practice and putting it into content creation. And I don't necessarily think this is an epidemic. I don't think it's something that is destroying all of the leagues or anything, but I do think that North America has more of a focus on content creation than other leagues do, and that certainly may take a competitive edge out of North America versus these other regions. And I think people should start reflecting upon how much they do content creation in order to kind of maximize their balance or just decide of what they want to focus on within their career as a professional player.